The envelope felt heavier than it should have. It only held a single sheet of paper, but in that moment, it seemed like the weight of my entire family's judgment pressed against me. My father's stern face told me everything I needed to know before I even opened it. This wasn't going to be a pleasant Christmas Eve. I glanced around the room, lit warmly by the glow of the fireplace and the twinkle of the Christmas tree. It felt like a mockery against the cold silence in the air. My sister Michaela sat perched on the arm of Mom's favorite leather chair, already wearing the diamond bracelet they'd given her earlier in the evening. Her sugary sweet voice broke the tense silence. "Well, aren't you going to open it?" The lawyer sitting in the corner shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't exactly the kind of guest you'd expect at a family holiday gathering, but this wasn't a typical family. I broke the seal on the envelope with careful precision, my every move scrutinized by 4 pairs of eyes. My hands trembled slightly as I pulled out the document inside. "I don't understand," I said after reading it, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're cutting me out of the will completely?" Mom, Vanessa, to her society friends, didn't even look up from her wine glass. "It's for the best, dear. You've made your choice, and we've made ours." I blinked at her, stunned. "My choice?" I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. "You mean starting my own business instead of joining the family firm?" "A bakery," Dad said, his voice dripping with disdain. "We spent a fortune on your education, and you want to spend your life making cupcakes?" "They're not just cupcakes, Dad," I said firmly. "It's my dream." "Dreams don't pay bills," he said sharply. "Michaela understands responsibility. She's already proving herself at the firm." Michaela's smirk widened as she crossed her legs, clearly reveling in the moment. "Don't be dramatic, Zuri," she said, her tone syrupy. "You had to know this was coming. I mean, what did you expect?" I stared at her, then at the document in my hand. For a moment, the lights on the tree behind her blurred, and I remembered a time when we'd all sat around that tree as kids, laughing and opening presents. Back then, family had meant something. Now, it felt like nothing more than a formality. I stood slowly, folding the paper with precision. "Actually," I said, smoothing my dress, "I expected better from my parents." Silly me. "Now, Zurl," Ernest, the lawyer, began awkwardly, "perhaps this discussion could wait until after the holidays." "There's nothing to discuss," Mom said coldly, her tone as sharp as the edge of her wine glass. "The decision is final." I turned toward the coat rack, my fingers fumbling for my winter jacket. The wool felt scratchy against my neck, but I couldn't tell if it was the fabric or the lump forming in my throat. "Where are you going?" Dad demanded as I slung my purse over my shoulder. "I've lost my appetite." "We haven't even had dinner yet," Michaela chimed in. I stopped at the doorway, one hand on the handle. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I turned to look at all of them. "You know what's funny?" I said, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. "You think you're punishing me. But really, you might just be punishing yourselves more than you realize." Dad's face flushed. "What's that supposed to mean?" Michaela's perfectly manicured brows furrowed as she stood. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I smiled. "Merry Christmas," I said softly, "and good luck. Something tells me you're going to need it." The heavy oak door closed behind me with a satisfying thud, sealing me out of the warmth of the house, and out of their world. Outside, snow was falling softly, the flakes muffling the sound of Christmas carols drifting from the neighboring houses. I stood in the driveway for a moment, letting the cold air sting my cheeks. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and dialed the number I'd memorized. "Natasha?" "Yeah, it's done," I said into the phone. "They did exactly what we thought they would." Natasha's voice came through the line, calm and reassuring. "Are you okay?" I walked toward my car, my boots crunching in the snow. "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." "You sure about this?" Natasha asked. I opened the car door, sliding into the driver's seat. "Remember that thing we talked about?" I asked. "Yeah. I think it's time." The call ended, and I sat in the car for a moment, staring at the house I'd grown up in. From here, the lights looked beautiful, casting a golden glow over the snow. But the warmth was a lie. They thought they'd written me out of their story, but they had no idea I was about to write my own ending. As I pulled out of the driveway, the snow began to cover my tracks, erasing any evidence that I'd been there at all. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller, fading into the distance. They're built from scratch, I whispered to myself, thinking about the bakery I'd dreamed of starting. Just like the perfect cake. A message from Michaela popped up on my phone. Hope you're happy with yourself. You've ruined Christmas. I typed back quickly, on the contrary, sis. This is the best Christmas gift I could have gotten, freedom. 3 months earlier, I stood on the porch of a house I never thought I'd return to, the family's long-neglected vacation property by the lake. The air was crisp, the water calm, and the house? A time capsule of the life my parents used to flaunt but had long since forgotten. Natasha stood beside me, whistling softly as she glanced up at the 2-story cabin. And they just left this in your name? Tax purposes, I said with a shrug, holding up the key. They probably don't even remember they did it. And they haven't used it in how long? At least 3 years. I unlocked the door and pushed it open, the scent of dust and stale air greeting us. Everything inside was exactly as I remembered it, pine furniture, nautical-themed decor, and shelves lined with books no one had read in decades. This place could sell for a fortune, Natasha said, peering through one of the lakefront windows. I pulled out my phone and opened the real estate estimate I'd saved. I showed it to her, and her eyes widened. Holy, Zural. That's more than enough to start your bakery, and then some. Exactly, I said, stepping into the kitchen. My fingers brushed against the countertops, which were still coated in a fine layer of dust. The down payment, equipment, rent for the first year, it's all covered. Natasha turned to me, a spark of excitement in her eyes. Do you think your parents even remember this house exists? Not a chance, I said with a bitter laugh. To them, this was just a tool to dodge taxes. But to me? It's my ticket out of their shadow. Over the next several weeks, I worked in secret, meeting with real estate agents, signing papers, and finally selling the house to a retired couple who fell in love with its rustic charm. The funds hit my account faster than I expected, and for the first time, my dream felt tangible. Are you sure about this? Brett, a friend of mine from college, asked one afternoon as we sat in a downtown cafe reviewing my business plan. People always underestimate me, I said, sliding a sample of one of my recipes across the table. But they won't for long. Try this. He took a bite of the lavender honey cake, his expression changing immediately. Okay, he said, nodding. You're definitely serious about this. This is incredible. And that's not even my best recipe, I teased, pulling out my laptop to show him the location I'd been eyeing. What do you think of this spot? High foot traffic, reasonable rent, and it's just a few blocks from my family's firm. Brett raised an eyebrow. Are you really planning to put this bakery right in their line of sight? It's not about revenge, I said, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed myself. It's about proving that I can do this. On my own. The day the contractors hung the sign above the door, I stood across the street and watched the sunlight catch the gold lettering. It felt surreal. My name. My dream. My rules. When we opened, the bakery quickly became the talk of downtown. Lines stretched past neighboring businesses, and the smell of fresh pastries filled the air. I poured every ounce of my energy into the business, perfecting recipes, building a loyal customer base, and proving to myself that this dream wasn't just possible, it was thriving. 3 months after opening, the bell above the door chimed, and I glanced up from behind the counter. My mother stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but for the first time, she looked unsure. Mom, I said, my tone cool but polite. What brings you here? She stepped inside hesitantly, her eyes scanning the bustling bakery. This is impressive, she admitted, her gaze lingering on the custom display cases and the wall of press clippings. Thank you, I said, returning to the task at hand. Your father and I need to talk to you, she said after a moment. I gestured to a table by the window. Have a seat. I'll be with you in a minute. As I brought over a cup of tea and a plate of lavender shortbread cookies, Mom's expression softened. Earl Grey, I said. Your favorite. She took a sip, her hands wrapped tightly around the cup. The firm is in trouble, she said finally. I wasn't surprised. We've lost several major clients, and the banks won't approve any new loans, she continued. We're out of options. And what does this have to do with me? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Mom hesitated, then said, "We need a partner. Someone with assets. Someone who understands business." I laughed, setting down my own cup. I thought baking cupcakes wasn't a real business. "We were wrong," she said quietly, her voice tinged with regret. "Yes, you were," I said. "But I'm not interested in saving you. You made it clear how little you thought of me and my dreams. I've built something better, something that doesn't depend on your approval." Her face fell, but she didn't argue. "I just thought I'd ask," she said, standing to leave. As she walked toward the door, she turned back and said, "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you." It wasn't long before I heard from Michaela. "Mom says you turned them down," she said when I answered her call. "That's right. You're unbelievable, Zuri. This isn't just about you, it's about family." "Funny," I said, leaning against the counter. "You didn't seem to care about family when you handed me that envelope on Christmas Eve." "Whatever," she snapped. "Just don't come crying to us when your little bakery fails." "Don't worry," I said. "I won't." Over the next few weeks, word spread about the firm's struggles. Clients continued to pull out, employees were let go, and my father's reputation began to crumble. Meanwhile, the dream weaver flourished. Natasha and Brett teased me relentlessly about the irony of it all. "Come on," Natasha said one afternoon, holding up her phone. "They must be losing their minds, knowing you're the one thriving now." "It's not about them," I said, though we all knew that wasn't entirely true. The line outside the Dream Weaver stretched down the block that morning. The smell of fresh cranberry orange scones and lavender honey cakes filled the air, mingling with the crisp breeze. My newest hire, Sarah, poked her head into the kitchen, looking frazzled but exhilarated. "We've got another line out the door. And 3 more wedding cake consultations just booked online." "Good," I said, wiping flour off my hands and peeking through the kitchen window. The sight of the packed cafe still made my heart swell with pride. It wasn't just about the business itself, it was about proving to myself, and everyone else, that I could succeed on my own terms. "Your red velvet cake just got featured on Food and Wine's Instagram," Brett announced, walking in through the back door with his usual coffee in hand. He had become a regular visitor, stopping by with updates on the local business scene and his ongoing curiosity about my progress. "Here," I said, handing him a fresh almond croissant. "Payment for being my unofficial business advisor." "You're really leaning into this success thing," he teased, but I could see the admiration in his eyes. "I've got to admit," he continued, lowering his voice, "I didn't think you'd pull this off. But now? You're a force to be reckoned with." "People always underestimate me," I said, arranging a tray of golden brown pastries. He took a bite of the croissant, groaning in approval. "Okay, that's officially the best thing I've ever tasted. By the way, have you heard about the latest at your family's firm?" I raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "They've let go of 3 more junior partners, and their biggest client just signed with another firm." I didn't say anything, focusing instead on piping delicate roses onto a wedding cake sample. "You don't feel bad for them at all?" Brett asked, though his tone was more curious than judgmental. "Why should I?" I said, setting down the piping bag. "They disowned me because I dared to follow my dreams. They made their choices. Now, they can deal with the consequences." Later that afternoon, as I prepared for the lunch rush, the bell above the door chimed. I glanced up, only to find Michaela standing in the doorway, looking pale and disheveled. "Sis," she said, forcing a smile. "You've been avoiding my calls." "I've been busy," I replied, pulling a fresh tray of cookies from the oven. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "I need your help," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I turned to face her, crossing my arms. "Oh? How's that corner office treating you?" Michaela flinched, the tension in her shoulders betraying her usual composed demeanor. "It's gone," she admitted. "The firm is falling apart. And now you want my help?" I asked, my voice cool. "It's not just about me," she said. "It's about Mom and Dad. They don't know what to do." I stared at her for a moment, searching for any sign of the smug, condescending sister I'd always known. But all I saw was desperation. "I'll think about it," I said, turning back to my work. "Please, Zuri," Michaela said, her voice cracking. "I don't have anywhere else to turn." 3 days later, Michaela was back. This time, she wasn't wearing her usual designer suit. She looked tired, her makeup smudged, and her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. "I'm serious," she said, standing outside the bakery before we opened. "I need a job. I'll do whatever you need, wash dishes, mop floors. Just give me a chance." I studied her, unsure whether to believe her. "You've never worked a day in your life," I said flatly. "I know," she replied. "But I'll start at the bottom if I have to. I need to prove to myself that I can do this. That I can be more than what they made me." Something in her voice softened me, and I handed her an apron. "Start by wiping down the tables," I said. "If you can get through the lunch rush without quitting, we'll talk." Watching Michaela scrub tables and mop floors was surreal. The once polished version of her seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone who was determined to work. She didn't complain, even when her hands turned red and raw from the cleaning solution. "Your hands are bleeding," I said during a brief lull in the lunch rush. She glanced at them, then shrugged. "It's fine. I deserve worse." I handed her a small jar of hand cream. "First rule of service work, take care of yourself, or you won't be able to take care of the business." She nodded, carefully applying the cream before getting back to work. The next day, as Michaela mopped the floor near the register, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see Mom standing there, her expression frozen in shock. "Michaela," she said sharply. "What are you doing here?" "Working," Michaela replied without missing a beat. "In an apron?" Mom said, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Table 6 needs more napkins," I said, ignoring Mom's pointed tone. "On it," Michaela replied, hurrying past her. Mom turned to me, her carefully maintained facade cracking. "Is this some kind of punishment?" "No," I said, arranging pastries in the display case. "This is her choice. First real one she's ever made." Mom's eyes followed Michaela as she returned to the counter, her hands trembling slightly. "Your father and I sold the house," Mom said suddenly, her voice strained. "We're moving into a small apartment next week." I raised an eyebrow but didn't reply. "He's looking for work," she continued. "But, no one's hiring." "Our reputation is exactly what you earned," I said coldly. Mom flinched. "I came to ask, if you could help him find a job," she said finally. I laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "Not a chance," I said. "But there's a new cafe opening in one of my buildings next month. I can put in a word with the owner." "As what?" "Dishwasher," I said. "Same place Michaela started." That evening, after Mom left, Michaela approached me cautiously. "She's different," she said quietly. "Not enough," I replied. "And you?" she asked, her voice hesitant. I paused, considering her question. "I've changed, Michaela. But I'm done proving myself to them. Now, it's their turn." Michaela nodded, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. The morning sun streamed through the bakery's front windows, casting golden light on the bustling crowd inside. Michaela, now several weeks into her new role, moved with more confidence. She poured coffee, cleared tables, and even managed to keep a smile on her face. "Your sister's a natural," Natasha teased, leaning against the counter as she watched Michaela wipe down a table. "She's getting there," I replied. "She's still figuring out how to steam milk without making a mess." Natasha grinned. "Baby steps." The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see Brett striding in, a familiar stack of papers in hand. "Good news or bad?" I asked as he set the papers on the counter. "Depends on how much you like your family," he said with a smirk. "Not much," Natasha chimed in before I could answer. Brett shook his head, amused. "The firm situation is worse than I thought. They've lost another major client, and their loan application has been denied again." I picked up a scone from the display case and handed it to him. "Here. You've earned this for delivering such delightful news. Remind me never to get on your bad side," Brett said before taking a bite. Later that afternoon, as I was going over the day's orders, Michaela approached me hesitantly. "You've got a visitor," she said, her voice unusually subdued. "Who?" She stepped aside, revealing Dad standing just inside the doorway. He looked older than I remembered, his once proud shoulders slumped and his face lined with exhaustion. "Dad," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "This is a surprise." I'm not here to argue, he said, holding up his hands. Good, I replied. Because I'm not interested. He hesitated, his gaze shifting around the bakery. This place is impressive, he said finally. Thanks, I said shortly, returning to my work. Look, he said, taking a deep breath, I need to apologize. For everything. I paused, turning to face him. Do you? Yes, he said firmly. I was wrong to dismiss your dreams. We all were. And now, I need your help. I sighed, crossing my arms. What kind of help? The firm is on the verge of collapse, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. We've lost nearly all our clients, and we don't know how to recover. I tilted my head, studying him. And why should I help you? Because we're family, he said. And because I'm asking. I took a deep breath, weighing his words. Come back tomorrow, I said finally. We'll talk then. At exactly 5 o'clock the next evening, my parents walked into the bakery. I'd closed early and sent my staff home, leaving the space empty except for me and Natasha, who was cleaning tables while shamelessly eavesdropping. Tea? I offered, gesturing to the vintage tea set I'd laid out. Earl Grey, Mom said softly, settling into a chair. Dad looked uncomfortable but nodded. Thank you, he said gruffly as I poured the tea and set out a plate of shortbread cookies. So, I said, sitting across from them, what's this about? Mom hesitated, then said, we want to make things right. We want to be a family again. And the firm? I asked pointedly. Dad sighed. It's gone. We filed for bankruptcy this morning. I nodded, unsurprised. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice calm but firm. A chance, Mom said. To start over. To prove to you that we've changed. I leaned back, studying them both. And what makes you think you deserve that chance? Because we've learned the hard way what happens when you take people for granted, Dad said, his voice steady. And because we're willing to do the work to earn your forgiveness. I was quiet for a long moment. Finally, I said, forgiveness takes time. And proof. But I'll give you one chance. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, I said. I'm not going to make this easy for you. A week later, Michaela, Mom, Dad, and I sat around the same dining table where everything had fallen apart the previous Christmas Eve. The house was smaller now, their new apartment modest but cozy. This feels strange, Michaela said as she set the table. Good strange or bad strange? I asked, carrying over a tray of food. Both, she admitted. Dinner was quieter than I'd expected, the air filled with a mix of awkwardness and tentative hope. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. I've been offered a job, he said. That's great, Michaela said, smiling. As a dishwasher, he added. Mom reached over and squeezed his hand. It's a start. I nodded. It's honest work. And a reminder of what it takes to build something from the ground up. Dad met my gaze. Thank you for recommending me to the cafe owner. Don't thank me, I said. Just show up and do the work. He nodded, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his expression that resembled humility. Over the following months, I watched as my family slowly began to rebuild their lives. Dad worked diligently at the cafe, earning the respect of his coworkers. Mom took a part-time job at a department store, learning how to manage inventory and assist customers. And Michaela? She flourished at the bakery. She started as a dishwasher and worked her way up to handling customer service and inventory. One afternoon, as she finished her shift, I handed her a contract. What's this? She asked, her eyes wide. It's an offer to manage the new location we're opening downtown, I said. Her jaw dropped. Are you serious? You've earned it, I said simply. Tears filled her eyes as she signed the contract. Thank you, Zuri. For giving me this chance. 6 months after Michaela started working at the Dreamweaver, the changes in her were undeniable. Gone was the haughty, privileged woman who had once looked down on me for following my dreams. In her place was someone who had learned the value of humility and hard work. You're sure about this promotion? Natasha asked as she helped me prepare the training materials for our newest location. I've never been more sure, I said. She's earned it. Natasha glanced at Michaela, who was stacking boxes of supplies in the storeroom. You really think she's ready to manage an entire location? She's been here 6 months, I said. She's learned every aspect of the business, from washing dishes to running the register. She's handled difficult customers, organized inventory, and even came up with a new recipe that's been a hit. Natasha smirked. Fair enough. Just don't expect me to start being nice to her. On the day of Michaela's promotion ceremony, Brett arrived with his usual stack of updates. You're not going to believe this, he said, handing me a sheet of paper. I skimmed the document, my eyebrows rising. They're officially bankrupt? Yep, Brett said. Your parents' firm has been dissolved. The house is gone. The cars, the investments, all of it. I handed the paper back to him. Good, I said simply. Now they know what it feels like to lose everything. You're cold, Zuri, Brett teased, though there was admiration in his voice. No, I said, my tone serious. I'm just honest. They needed to hit rock bottom to understand what they put me through. The promotion ceremony for Michaela was small but heartfelt, held in the bakery's main dining area after hours. My staff gathered to celebrate, along with a few of our regular customers who had become like family. As I handed Michaela the keys to the new location, her hands trembled. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You earned this, I said simply. She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. I still don't know why you gave me a chance after everything I did. Because I believe in second chances, I replied. While Michaela prepared to take on her new role, Mom and Dad continued to adjust to their new reality. Dad's job as a dishwasher humbled him in ways I never thought possible. He showed up every day, on time, and worked without complaint. Mom, meanwhile, had climbed the ranks at her part-time job at the department store, earning a promotion to shift supervisor. One afternoon, as I was reviewing inventory in the back room, my phone buzzed with a text from Michaela. Mom and Dad want to have dinner. Will you come? I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing a response. Fine. What time? The family dinner felt like stepping into an alternate reality. Instead of the lavish meals I'd grown up with, the table was set with simple dishes, and the atmosphere was quieter, more subdued. We wanted to thank you, Mom said as she passed me a plate of roasted vegetables. For what? I asked. For helping us start over, Dad said. You didn't have to, but you did. I shrugged. I wasn't doing it for you. I was doing it for myself. Regardless, Mom said, her voice soft, we're grateful. And proud. What you've built, it's incredible. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of their words. Over the next year, the Dream Weaver expanded beyond what I had ever imagined. With Michaela managing the new location and Natasha and Brett helping me oversee operations, we opened 3 more locations in the downtown area. One of the properties we acquired was an old office building that we converted into a small business incubator and community center. This is your idea of revenge, isn't it? Natasha teased as we walked through the newly renovated space. It's not revenge, I said. It's giving other people the chance I never had. Natasha rolled her eyes. Sure. But admit it feels good to know your family has to watch you succeed. I smiled. Okay, maybe a little. By the time we opened our 5th location, Mom and Dad had transformed into people I barely recognized, in the best way. Mom volunteered at the community center, teaching workshops on retail management and customer service. Dad, meanwhile, had been promoted to manager at the cafe where he'd started as a dishwasher. You think you'll ever hire him? Brett asked one day as we toured a new property. Maybe, I said. But only if he applies like everyone else. At the annual Business Award ceremony, the Dream Weaver was named Business of the Year. Standing on stage, I couldn't help but glance at my parents, who sat in the audience alongside Michaela, Brett, and Natasha. Success isn't inherited, I said during my acceptance speech. It's built from scratch, one step at a time. Sometimes, it's born from rejection. Sometimes, it's fueled by defiance. But the best kind of success is the kind that inspires others to grow. As the applause filled the room, I saw my mom wipe away tears, Dad sitting taller than I'd seen him in years, and Michaela beaming with pride. In that moment, I knew I'd not only proven myself, I'd built something that would outlast all of us. 6 months after the community center renovation began, we hosted its grand opening. The space was now a vibrant hub for aspiring entrepreneurs, complete with shared office spaces, a commercial kitchen for food startups, and classrooms for workshops on business management. The local press turned out in full force, and the mayor himself came to cut the ribbon. I stood by, feeling a sense of pride that went far deeper than any business success I'd achieved. This wasn't just my victory, it was a chance to give others the opportunity one had fought so hard to create for myself. Michaela, who had become an integral part of the project, leaned over and whispered, "Can you believe this? A year ago, I thought I had everything, and now I know I didn't have a clue." "You've come a long way," I said, smiling. "So have you," she replied. As the event wound down, Mom and Dad approached me. They looked different now, not in their appearance, but in their demeanor. Mom, once so perfectly polished and guarded, now radiated warmth. Dad, who had always carried himself with a prideful edge, now seemed grounded and sincere. "The center is incredible," Mom said. "Thanks," I replied. "It's something I've wanted to do for a while." Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to thank you again, for helping us see what we needed to change." I raised an eyebrow. "You did the work. I just stopped cleaning up your messes." He chuckled, a sound I hadn't heard in years. "Fair enough. But still, we're proud of you. What you've built, it's more than we ever imagined." "Thanks, Dad," I said softly. By the time we opened our 7th location, Michaela was thriving in her role as regional manager. She had earned the respect of our team and had become one of my most trusted advisors. One evening, as we sat in the back office reviewing expansion plans, she hesitated before speaking. "I want to thank you," she said finally. "For what?" "For giving me a chance," she replied. "You didn't have to, but you did. And I'll never forget it." I shrugged, trying to downplay the emotion of the moment. "You earned it." "Still," she said, her voice cracking slightly, "it means everything to me." One afternoon, I stopped by the cafe where Dad had started as a dishwasher. He was behind the counter, wearing an apron and chatting with a customer. When he saw me, he smiled. "Zuri," he called out. "What brings you here?" "Just wanted to check in," I said, leaning against the counter. "How's the bakery?" "Thriving," I replied. "How's the cafe?" "Busy," he said with a grin. "Keeps me on my toes." I glanced around the space, taking in the happy customers and the buzzing atmosphere. "You look happy," I said. "I am," he replied. For the first time in a long time. That year, our annual family dinner was different. We gathered in the kitchen of my home, simple, warm, and filled with the smell of freshly baked bread. There was no lawyer with an envelope, no tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Instead, there was laughter, shared stories, and the quiet comfort of a family finally finding its way back to each other. As we sat around the table, Michaela raised her glass. "To Zuri," she said, her voice filled with pride. "For proving us all wrong, and for teaching us how to be better." "To second chances," Mom added, smiling at me. "To hard work," Dad said, clinking his glass against mine. "To the future," I said, my heart full as we toasted together. Years later, as I stood in front of the Dreamweaver Enterprises headquarters, a beautiful brick building in the heart of downtown, I reflected on how far we'd come. The business had grown into an empire, with locations across the city and beyond. The community center was thriving, helping countless entrepreneurs turn their dreams into reality. And my family? They were no longer the people who had dismissed me all those years ago. Michaela had become my right-hand woman, overseeing operations with skill and compassion. Mom continued to volunteer at the community center, sharing her hard-earned wisdom with others. And Dad, now retired, had become one of my biggest supporters, showing up to every event and telling anyone who would listen about his daughter's success. As I prepared to give a keynote speech at a business summit, I reached into my pocket and pulled out the torn envelope I had kept since that fateful Christmas Eve. It was a reminder of where I'd started, of the rejection that had once fueled me, and the redemption that had followed. I smoothed the paper, thinking of the words I would say to the audience. Success isn't inherited, I would tell them. It's built from scratch, with equal parts determination, resilience, and heart. And the sweetest kind of success is the kind that helps others grow along the way. Thank you for watching the video, subscribe and turn on notifications to be the first to have Radish and real stories with you. Have a great day.